Come on. Ah, I know better than that. You know, the starter's been clicking for about a week, but eventually it would start. Now, absolutely nothing. I hope Brian's still in there because we're gonna have to go through this starting system. As a matter of fact, today on Tech Garage, we're gonna go through the complete electrical system so this doesn't happen again. Crew cab Silverado, over 5,000 pounds. Whew, not easy to push. Welcome to Tech Garage presented by Advanced Auto Parts. Brian, I am sure glad you stuck around because this thing is a beast to push.
It certainly is. You know, last year you had to pull me out of a ditch in a Jeep. This year I got to push your truck into the shop. You're killing me.
Well, I'll tell you what, my wife and kids are home with dinner and I am not. I want to go home. You know what? I'm kind of embarrassed as it is. Cranking that starter. It was clicking, but it wouldn't start. I knew it was going. Now I'm clicking it and nothing's happening. I'm pretty sure it's a starter.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, while we got two sets of eyes here, maybe there's a few diagnostic tests we can do and see what's going on.
Well, first one, and you can do this right out in the driveway. It's called a headlight test. Get in there, fire up the headlights, and what we're looking for, we're making sure that's burning. That's giving us a good indication the battery's pretty much fully powered. We can do some in-depth diagnostics a little bit later. Trying to start it, I hear it clicking. Nothing's going on. We're not changing the headlights. That tells us one or two things. Either we have an open in the system, or the solenoid in the starter is not engaging, or it's shorted out to all the way down on the magnets. One of those three things is happening. This one, I'm pretty sure it's a starter.
And if it was a battery issue, we would see those headlights dimming, or the dome light. That's another big clue, dimming when you're trying to crank it, and you get that famous rawr, rawr. Yep. We don't have any of that.
No, we don't. Another symptom of that also, you could have an engine that's seized up, thick oil, or a shorted armature in the starter. It's going to draw a bunch of amperage. Your headlight's going to go dim. Now, there's a bunch of other tests you can run. There's noises, there's clicks, single clicks, double clicks, whines. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but we need to get a starter on this joker. So, step number one.
Get that battery disconnected.
I'll tell you what, I'll get that disconnected for you. I'll wrap it in a rag.
Okay, perfect. All right, so he'll get the battery disconnected. I'm going to get this thing up on the lift. Now, if you're working in your driveway, you don't have access to a lift, you may want to get the vehicle up on jack stands so you can work underneath. Be sure it's secure, be sure it's level, and I tell you what, you have to disconnect that battery. It's high amps. You don't want any chance of sparks, arcing, or welding going on. That's a lot of amps going down there. So
hey, you're safe. You're good and safe.
Thank you, buddy. I'll get it up in the air. We'll be safe, and I'm going to work on this thing from underneath. I'll get that old starter out and the new one in.
Now, a starter system. What is it? How does it work? And how can we diagnose it? Well, we got one laid out right here on a board for you to see. Starter system's pretty simple. Starts at the key. You turn the key to start. When you turn the key to start, the power's then going to run, and it's going to go through a neutral safety switch. You know, you can only start your car in park or neutral, or a clutch switch if you have a manual transmission. Then I'm going to come over and I'm going to go through a relay or a solenoid. And all this is doing is just transferring high amps with small amps. It's like a relay. And then it sends it over to the solenoid, and of course, the starter is going to run. So if I turn the key, the power completes, the starter turns over. Now, a couple of tests you want to make, and you can do this right out in the driveway. Just be careful when you're underneath the car. There's two places I want some voltage at the starter. To begin with, I have to have 12 volts here at the bat terminal. It's the big one coming into the starter. Now be careful, if your battery's connected, that's hot. I'm going to come over to ground, and I don't even need to turn the key, and I'm showing 12.61. That's the first place you want 12 volts. There's also another place, it's called the start wire. When I turn that key, we need 12 volts at that place. Well, that's located right here. Now what you get there is you'll get a lot less than 12 volts. You may get 10, even 9, because the starter's consuming a lot of the voltage when I turn it over. So let's watch the meter. We're doing 10. Your car may be 9 or even a little less because you got the mechanical resistance of the engine, which is drawing a lot more electricity. But if you have it at those two places, you're in good shape. You know it's a starter, and that's what's happening to us. That's why Brian's replacing the starter. We got voltage there, and the starter's not working. Now, if the voltage was low, that means you have resistance somewhere in the circuit. And I can show you a cool trick. It's called voltage drop. It checks for resistance. We're looking for lost voltage. I'll go on the positive cable first. And when I go on the positive, we're actually going to go from positive to positive. So I'm coming all the way up to the bat. Positive to positive, I don't have any voltage. But when I run the car, the voltage and pressure is going to go through there along with the amps, and we're going to see if we lost any, and that's what the meter is actually going to read. There's about 0.2 or 0.2 of a volt. If you had more than 0.5 of a volt, it's going to start to actually go slow. We're going to lose the voltage. Instead of the 12, now we got what? 11.5. You drop a volt, I'm down to 10. We got a problem. So you got to go in there and find what's causing resistance. It could be a loose cable. It may be a loose battery cable. It just may be some corroded wires. Now that test also applies on the negative side. So we can go over to the negative to negative. So I'm going to the negative battery cable, and the starter's grounded to the block. So if I just ground this lead here, once again we have nothing. But watch when we push the voltage and amperage through. 0.1, a little more than that. That's fine. More than a half a volt, once again, voltage drop, a problem. The starter could be loose, the negative cable, it's not getting back to the battery. That's voltage drop. Now we also have some other issues called sound or noise we talked about. The clicks, the shims, and what's going on with that. Well, it's real simple. I got a starter bolted up right here and you can see it. I can actually run it, but when I run it, listen to it. You hear that high-pitched whine? Well, that high-pitched whine means that the starter's actually too far away from the flywheel. So if it's too far away from the flywheel, you want to take a couple of these shims and you want to remove it, and that'll push it up closer to the flywheel. Now, on the other hand, if I'm turning it over and it's fine, it sounds good, and I release the key, and then you hear a high-pitched whine, woo! What that is it's actually too close, so you want to add some shims. You want to make sure that's right, because look at this flywheel right here. This one wasn't right, and what happened? It ate it to pieces. Now Brian's underway. He's working really hard. Let's check in with him and see how it's going with our starter.
Well, John, we're looking pretty good. I think you're getting home tonight. We've got the old starter off. Now, quick inspection here. Look at this gear and see if there's any damage. Remember, John talked about that alignment? Doesn't appear to be any here, and we really didn't have any of those symptoms, so I think we're okay. Now, before you put in the new starter, you want to use a really important tool, your cell phone, because you want to inspect that flywheel. And many times, if you're out under the vehicle in the driveway, it's hard to see up into that window. Get your cell phone, get it up in here, get a good hold, turn your flash on, and get a good look at that flywheel. So now, I'm going to call it up and take a look, and I'll tell you what, it looks pretty good. I don't see any damage there. Again, we're not looking at the whole thing, but it's enough to give you a clue that it's okay. So, final step, before you install your new starter, you want to hold it up to the old one, compare the mounting brackets, check the number of posts on the solenoid. Everything looks good. This is a really good CarQuest starter. It's going to have a long life. It's interesting that on this big V8, this is such a small starter. Remember, John talked about the gear reduction. So this is going to do the job. I'm going to reverse engineer this, start with the low voltage wire connection right here, work it back up in, install my two mounting bolts. Of course, I'm going to torque them, and we're getting ready to get John back on the road. Well, stay with us on Tech Garage, presented by Advance Auto Parts.
Tech Garage, presented by Advance Auto Parts, is being brought to you by K&N Filters. Superior airflow, superior performance. Dustless blasting. It's the future of surface preparation. Custom Auto Sound, the originator of classic car OEM fit radios since 1977. And by Advance Auto Parts. Let's get you back on the road.
Welcome back to Tech Garage, presented by Advance Auto Parts. Now it's the moment of truth. Brian promised I would get home with my family and be able to eat some dinner with them. Well, I got the negative battery cable hooked up, and it's time to go ahead and give it a test run. We got Chief Tech Chase in the car to go ahead and start it up. Let's see if it works, Chase. Man, it sounds great, and I never get tired of that air-raid cold air intake when it's sucking in the air. It's a great sound. I also promised you some tests we were gonna run. Electrical test. Always starts with the battery. I'm gonna use this old school VAT40. Why? So you can see the voltages and what's going on. There's a couple of newer methods that you can use, but this is pretty neat because I can actually demonstrate it for you. I'm just going to put the positive cable on the positive battery and the negative cable right across the negative battery terminal. Make sure they're secure. Once they're secure, you can see the voltage right here. We're actually pushing a little more than 12 volts. That's fine. Then I'm going to come up and I'm going to hook this around the negative battery cable. When I hook it up to the negative battery cable, I got to determine the cold cranking amps of the battery. So if the cold cranking amps is 600 cold cranking amps, I'm just going to cut it in half to 300. I'm going to load test it for 15 seconds. Well, what's going on? I'm actually taking all the amps into this carbon pile, and I don't want it to drop below 9.6 volts. So let's go ahead and do it. You want to watch two gauges. This one here is going up, and this one here is dropping slowly. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We go to 15 seconds. Make sure it doesn't drop below 9.6. This one's fine. This battery's in good shape. If it wasn't, go down and get me a new Optima, put it in there. I'm not going to have any worries. Second test I can actually run a charging system test. That's simple. I want to know if the alternator's putting out. So I can come over here. I can go around the alternator wire. And I have to make sure it's putting out amperage to get over to the battery. So I just switch it over to charging, and what I suspect to see is some major amp. It's probably going to peg the needle here at first because I just took all the amps out of the battery and he has to replenish it. If it's not moving, it's not charging. Chase, give it another crank up. And there it's pegged. Now if we wait a while, it's going to come back, but this alternator probably is capable of 120, maybe 140 amps, and it's doing its job. But once it starts charging, it'll actually start to come back. Why? Because an alternator only puts out what a battery needs. Once the battery starts to charge up, the amperage will start to fall. This one's doing pegged and it's charging well, okay? Go ahead and shut it off. Now the final test, I'm going to need a little help with. So Brian, you around there?
Sure am.
I'm going to have to disconnect a couple fuses over there, Brian, so the car doesn't start, so we can check the starter draw.
Well, a couple things you can do here. You can follow inside the fuse panel. You can find the fuel pump relay, or in this case, we can find the A side and B side, left and right bank fuel injector power. That way we can disable the power. We're not going to be shooting any fuel down in while we do the cranking test, and the vehicle won't run. So, looks like those are 24, 26. John, you should be good to go.
Good. Now I'm just going to take the probe. I'm going to hang it around the actual wire going to the starter so I can see the amps that are going to the starter. This time we're going to watch the red scale right here. I got it on starting. It's disabled. I'll have Chase go ahead and crank it for about 4 or 5 seconds. Chase, let's see what that starter's drawing. Wow. Perfect. All right, so it hit about 200 amps and then it came back to about 100, 150. Absolutely perfect. Brian, if that thing was drawing 400 or 500 amps,
yeah,
not good.
Not
Mechanical
good.
resistance, we got a problem. Be careful. Diesels can draw up to 600 amps. You got a better way to do it.
I love all the fancy gauges, even though they're old school, but if you're in a little bit of a hurry and you want accuracy in this test, you can go to any Advanced Auto Parts store. They'll throw out the EXP 1200 from Midtronics, which we call the ultimate truth teller, John. It tests the whole charging system path, the starter, the alternator, the battery, the energy, the cold cranking amps, and it'll print this off for you so you've got that for a reference. So that's the ultimate way to do the test if you need to, and I think we're about to get you back on the road, buddy.
I'll tell you what, that's the ultimate tester. I got the ultimate surprise for you. Hey, stick around. We got a little go-go juice, nitrous oxide to put on our project, RSX Resurrection. You've been talking about autocrossing that?
Oh, yeah.
Don't worry, stick around. You'll be doing it in no time soon. Welcome back to Tech Garage, presented by Advanced Auto Parts. Well, our project, RSX Resurrection's in the shop, and Brian, I gotta tell you, you remember at the beginning of this thing? Vision, imagination, my friend. Well, brother, you believe now. This looks like a new car. It's transformed.
I was a little skeptical, but I knew we had a great platform to work with, and I gotta say, I'm impressed.
Yeah, and you know, you had a good idea. We started out with the drilled and slotted rotors, the brakes. We knew we were gonna put some power in this thing, so why not start with the brakes? And with the heat dissipation of those drilled and slotted rotors, man, those things did the trick.
Massive upgrade on that system. We can truly drive it in any type of conditions, which is what we designed this thing to do. And from the time this car was built to today, the technology in brake pads, we made an upgrade there too. And then we started to get into that power equation, swapped out the injectors. Those old ones were sleepy.
And that makes all the difference in the world. You know how important it is to atomize that fuel and get it into that engine? You start talking power, hey, fuel's a perfect place to start. Only made sense to lower it down with the I-box springs and the Monroe struts. I mean, I knew you were going to be autocrossing. We were going to put a body kit on it. So look at the finished product. Those springs and struts really made it ride nice, handle, and safe to boot.
We got into more power. We did the cold air intake, opened up the exhaust, put that header on. So man, we're flowing a lot more air.
It's a big air pump, right?
Yep.
So everything we get in, we got to get out. The cold air intake did it, the header got that out, and the exhaust let it flow. So that was awesome. But you know, with the power came a little problem with the transmission and the clutch, man. I mean, putting a clutch in, master slave, the complete package, definitely the way to go.
Made a huge difference. And then on that test drive, that kind of exposed a bad behaving rear caliper. Remember the thing was sticking?
Yeah, you know, that's going to happen. That's going to happen to you guys. You get into a project like this, we probably should address that at the beginning, Brian, but you're going to find things like that. Calipers hanging up. It's an older car. Now the brakes are in good shape. That's all taken care of. You know, we went ahead and put CV axles, and then we put the ball joints in. We got pretty wise with that. So we went ahead and upgraded the suspension. And with the new CV axles, with the power, we're not going to have any issues there.
Yeah, and the guys at Advance were so helpful in getting all those parts quickly like we needed. But I remember that test drive, and as I recall, we were both sweating a little bit because the AC wasn't working very well.
Man, that thing was all rotted and it was leaking, so we went ahead and replaced that. That was huge. We got air conditioning, but as I was riding, test driving with the air conditioning, now it's nice and quiet. It heard me a hum, man. That rear wheel bearing, we had some issues. Went ahead and replaced them both. Once again, older car, we're in good shape.
Geometry at all four corners. We want that, and that hub assembly couldn't have been an easier job. Got it on both sides. Now I feel really good. You think it felt tight early on. Boy, does it feel good on the road now, especially when you hang it out in turns. So really happy we did that. Then we got back into the power equation. We added those Excel Beastie coils. We're throwing more fire. I love those.
Yeah, spark, air, and fuel. A little bigger bang, you're going to get more performance. That's great. Only made sense to beef up the cooling system, so the new radiator and thermostat, we're not going to have any issues with that anymore.
Tremendous performance in all conditions there. And then there was the paint. I remember the night this came back from Eddie Williams' shop on the flatbed. We couldn't wait to get it in the studio lights. Man, does it look good.
Boy, does it look good. And the Montegi wheels and tires and rims, I mean, this really set it off. The matte bronze did the job. This thing is gorgeous.
And you know, there's engineering into the paint, all the prep. I was skeptical because all the dents and dings we had in this thing originally.
I'm telling you, look at the body lines.
The quality of work they do. Look at the lines, look at the gaps. It's fantastic. If you pop the tailgate, look how good this looks.
Whoa, wait a minute. What's inside of there?
Look how good that looks.
Yeah, and there's the icing on the cake. You're talking about that power equation. This is it right here. The Eldebrock nitrous system. We're putting a bunch more horsepower to that engine. I mean, this is really the icing on the cake.
Professional mounting. I love that. It's back here out of the sun. It's safely mounted. It's an easy system to put in. We got it all tuned. And of course, Chief Tech Chase and the team really did a great design through this whole thing. He wouldn't let us leave the shop without the jet programmer. This added so much power. We could do short tracks, big tracks, set the torque ranges wherever we wanted. This was a massive upgrade.
Hey, don't get mad at me. Chase let me drive, and let me tell you, this thing will smoke the tires. It is incredible. True transformation.
All right, fine. Well, I'll tell you what, I think you're headed to Burnyzz. You're taking your truck to that one, pal, because I got this booked for an autocross.
Yeah, we'll be right back. I'll meet you at Burnyzz with more Tech Garage presented by Advance Auto Parts.
Tech Garage, presented by Advance Auto Parts, is being brought to you by K&N Filters. Superior airflow, superior performance. Evapo-Rust, super safe rust remover. Clamp Tight, the clamp making tool. And by Advance Auto Parts. Let's get you back on the road.
Welcome back to Tech Garage presented by Advance Auto Parts. Now, throughout the season, we've been bolting on horsepower and torque on our project, RSX Resurrection. This performance playbook, we're bringing it to a new level. Josh, tell me about this engine.
This is a billet block, 426 cubic inch Hemi, dual magnetos, nitro injector. We run 94% nitromethane.
Wow, what kind of horsepower is estimated this thing?
4,000 plus. There's actually no dynometer that can measure it.
There's no dyno in the world that could measure this horsepower or torque.
Correct.
Well, what kind of compression ratio do you run?
We're running 13 to 1.
13 to 1 compression. That probably makes it hard to start. Now, we actually put a starter on a pickup truck this week over at Tech Garage. How do you start this thing?
This is our RCD starter. It actually spins the motor over, and then you remove our starter.
And you get a big jump pack to run that, obviously.
Yes, sir.
Well, here at Burnyzz, they're all about power and performance. As a matter of fact, let's join John. He's in the process of putting on a supercharger.
We've got a 2015 C7 Corvette we're putting a supercharger on. Be a Pro Charger setup, good for about 120 horse to the pavement. This car pretty much comes set up, ready to go. It's already got the variable exhaust valving in it and everything else. Customer just wants a little bit extra oomph when he stabs it. Test drive will entail just going out, making sure it shifts through all the gears properly. There's no leak strips or anything else. And then we'll load it on our dyno, make some pulls on it, data log it, see if we can add or subtract fuel and make sure everything's happy. We do all our programming in-house. It is done with the dyno giving us all the feedback. We data log it, check the fuel curves, check the spark tables, make sure there's no knock, and then we add and subtract fuel to get the most horsepower possible safely.
That's this week's Performance Playbook. Back to Tech Garage for the email question of the week.
John, well, Jim from Medford, Oregon emailed this week. He's got a 97 Chevy pickup, and he says the battery light's staying on. We tried an old trick. He disconnected the battery, and the truck stayed running. He wants to know if the alternator's good.
Oh, yeah, we've all done that. Maybe back in the day, no problem, you get away with it. But today's computerized cars, that's not a good test. And I'll tell you why, Jim. Basically, an alternator produces alternating current. What happens, it gets rectified inside of here and it comes out DC, but it still comes out a little bit of ripple. So if you're sending that little bit of ripple to the computer, he doesn't like that. He likes smooth voltages. So what's happening, it sends it directly to the battery. The battery is a huge capacitor, a voltage stabilizer. It's taking that AC, it's making it a nice stable voltage, and it's sending it out to the car. Computer's happy, a lot safer. Check your electrical system like we did today.
Got to do that, or go down to Advanced. They'll check that whole system for you. You can see exactly what's going on. Now, what wasn't happening in your truck is the solenoid actuator. It was never actuating. We couldn't get any power down to the starter motor. So we got a little demo here to show what should happen. Yeah, well, you know what? We got you back on the road because these things live in a tough, severe duty environment, and I feel better about that because I can take the RSX out.
Well, Brian, thank you for getting me back to my family, and thank you, the viewer, for watching Tech Garage, where we get you back on the road.
Production assistance for Tech Garage is provided by Chipola College, located in Marianna, Florida.